I'm Frank Garza, and welcome to Here and Abroad, a podcast that follows the U.S. men's national team and their player pool across Europe, MLS, or wherever else they play their club football. On today's show, we're going to preview the World Cup draw that will happen this Friday, December 5th. With 48 teams split into 12 different groups, there are a load of possibilities for what the USMNT's draw could look like. I'm going to look at 4 different potential scenarios today: their best case, worst case, most entertaining case, and then the draw I would choose if it were up to me to hand select the 4 teams in the group. Okay, let's start with the best case scenario, which I'm really defining as the easiest. This is what I would feel is the easiest possible group we could draw that would allow us to advance out of the group stage. And I wouldn't be, I would feel very confident that the U.S. could advance to the knockout rounds if they had this group. Okay, so I'm calling that group the U.S., Australia, South Africa, and then the European playoff group B path, which would be either Ukraine, Sweden, Poland, or Albania. We won't know that until March when they have those European playoffs. But that's what I'm considering the easiest group. When I look at pot 2, so U.S. is going to be in pot 1, so we're going to avoid teams like Argentina, France, Brazil, England, Netherlands, Germany, teams that I feel like would be very hard to, I don't want to say any team is unbeatable, but, maybe France, Argentina, I would put in that category. But by being a host country, we get to be in pot 1 and avoid teams, like that. And so here's why I picked the teams that I did. Okay, first of all, the Australia would be the pot 2 team. When I look through pot 2, there's teams like Croatia, Morocco, Colombia, Uruguay, Switzerland, Japan. These are really good teams. I feel like Australia is probably the most beatable, other than maybe Iran. But I feel like Iran, because of the political situation, they're kind of extra fired up to play against us. And we played them in the last World Cup, and I just feel like Australia would be a little bit of an easier match. So Australia is ranked number 30 in the ELO ratings, and I'm going to use ELO ratings and rankings as I kind of talk about these different pots and these different teams. I find them to be more reliable than the FIFA rankings. The FIFA rankings, I think, are more long-term. They kind of look at country success and World Cups over many, many years, at least I find, while the ELO ratings are more like a current list of who's playing well and that sort of thing, and they're ranked accordingly. So the U.S. is number 34 in the ELO ratings. Australia would be number 30. I don't know if they're the lowest ranked team out of all the pot 2, but they're certainly one of them. And I just feel like, we just played Australia in a friendly. We beat them. They're going to be a tough match. All these teams in pot 2 are going to be a tough match. But I don't feel like they're a team that can hurt you that bad. They're not going to go out and score 3 or 4 goals on you. You're going to have to go out and get your goals and play solid. But I don't see a game with Australia getting away from the U.S. I feel like that's a very beatable opponent from pot 2. South Africa, I think is again, if you look at pot 3, you could end up with a team like Norway, Egypt, Scotland, Paraguay. I think South Africa is one of the lowest ranked teams there. They're number 77, again, compared to the U.S. number 34. And so I just thought, okay, I'm going to put South Africa there. And then the European playoff path B, I looked at the different European playoffs. There's 4 of them, and I feel like this is the easiest one. There's no real heavyweights in it. Ukraine is the highest ranked team. They're number 25, so they'd be expected to go through. And every group has to have one European team in it. Some groups are going to have two European teams. So automatically right there, when you're thinking of best case scenario, I think you want to be one of the groups that does not have that only has one European team. And then you want that European team to be, one of the weaker ones. And so that's why I think I went with that case right there. So maybe it would be U.S., Australia, South Africa, and Ukraine, could be the group. That's my best case, easiest path, for the United States. Okay, let's look at worst case. Okay, worst case, we have the U.S., you have Colombia, you have Norway, and then you have the European playoff path A, which is Italy, Northern Ireland, Wales, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. So Colombia, okay, Colombia is number 5 in the ELO ratings. Okay, so if you trusted the ELO ratings over the FIFA rankings, you would say Colombia should be a pot 1 team, but they're in pot 2. They're top talent, and the last time we played them, they blew us out of the water in one of the friendlies before the Copa America. Norway is, I think they went, if I'm not mistaken, they went undefeated in their World Cup qualifying group and beat out Italy. And they, of course, have Erling Haaland, who's one of the best goal scorers, in the world. And so getting them as a pot 3 team instead of a team like, South Africa, like I mentioned, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Paraguay, who we just beat in a friendly. Getting Norway is right now the number 11 ranked team in the ELO ratings. So getting them in pot 3 would be a bad deal. And then I really feel of all of the European playoff paths, the one with Italy is probably the most difficult. I mean, Italy's only the 18th ranked team in the world right now. They're not playing their best. Than they have over the years. Of course, they've won, World Cups before. It's just the name. I feel like Italy carries a certain weight with it. The name does. And so when you go up against them in a World Cup, I think there's like a mental aspect there that's challenging as well. So that would be my worst case scenario. The U.S., Colombia, Norway, Italy. Basically, you'd be in a group with the number 5, 11, and 18th ranked teams. That would definitely be the group of death there. Okay, let's look at most entertaining now. Okay, so what I had in mind was, okay, if I could, think about the storylines that the U.S. playing these teams, what storylines we'd have, maybe some top players that they could play. What would be the most fun to watch on TV, okay? So I went with the U.S., Uruguay, Norway, and Ghana. Okay, Uruguay I chose because I just feel like of all the teams in pot 2, I was struggling between Morocco and Uruguay here because both of these teams the U.S. has had a pretty good recent history with in terms of facing them in big-time matchups. I think Morocco has knocked us out of like 3 tournaments recently, the Olympics, then I think the U20, U17 World Cup, 2 youth tournaments. I don't quote me on that, but I think that those were the 2 ones. So we have a history of running into Morocco in the playoffs or in the knockout rounds and them being the ones that knock us out. But I still think with Uruguay, we played them in the Copa America. They eliminated us from the group stage. We just played them in this recent friendly and beat them, 5-1? Kind of blew them out of the water. And you have Mauricio Pochettino and Bielsa, the 2 coaches, kind of like mentor-mentee type of situation. And so I just think with the recent history between these 2 teams, that coaching, that blowout win that the U.S. had, there's just a lot of, tension between these 2 teams right now that I think would be fun to watch. in a World Cup match. Norway I chose exclusively for Erling Haaland, just to be kind of involved in a match with a player of his quality. I think would be really fun. And then Ghana. If you followed the U.S. for long, you know that Ghana has been one of our arch nemesis in previous World Cups. I believe they knocked us out of 2 World Cups. We played them in another and beat them in the group stage in a very entertaining match. One of my favorite matches I've ever watched. John Brooks scored the late header to give the U.S. The victory. But yeah, I just think U.S., Uruguay, Norway, Ghana, there'd be some really good storylines, in that group that would be fun to watch. Okay, last scenario. This is my choice. If I could go out and I could pick any World Cup group draw for the U.S., and I have to, of course, play by the rules where, I think you can only have one nation from each confederation in your group, except for Europe, where you could have 2. So I'm not just placing 4 teams here. This is 4 teams with the rules. I went with the U.S., Switzerland, Qatar, and Cape Verde. And I'm doing 2 things here. Number one, if I could truly pick the group for the U.S., I would pick an easier group because I want the U.S. to have a good path to qualify for the knockout round. And that's why I picked teams like maybe Qatar and Cape Verde. But I really would like to see the U.S. in at least one of their group stage matches have a challenging match, whereas if they beat that team, it would really mean something. It would give them some positive momentum going forward. Switzerland's is the 13th ranked team in the ELO ratings, so they're one of the top teams in Pot 2. We played them in a friendly earlier this year, and they completely demolished us. If you remember that, lots of questions about Pochettino and the direction this program was heading, after that match. And then, so I just feel like they would be a very challenging, team to play. And I would like to see the U.S. up against a European team, especially because the U.S. has had such little success against European teams at the World Cup in general. Qatar, I picked straight up because I feel like that's an easier opponent. And then Cape Verde, Qatar, by the way, is ranked 88. Cape Verde is ranked 72. I could have gone with a lot of different teams here, but I just thought, okay, I want to pick an easier team, and then I want to pick a team that would be fun to watch with a good story. Cape Verde, I believe, went down as the smallest nation to ever qualify for the World Cup, outside except for Iceland. And so to see a small country like that playing against, the U.S., I think would be really entertaining. And so I think this would be a fun group to watch, but also one that I would have a lot of confidence in, going forward. So there you go. The draw will happen, this Friday. One of the things I'm hoping to illustrate, with this exercise is that there's so many possibilities for what the U.S.'s group could look like. You could have a pretty easy group where it would be hard to imagine the U.S. not qualifying, or you could have a group of death. I mean, even though the U.S. is a Pot 1 team, you can see, like with the worst case I went over, U.S., Colombia, Norway, Italy, that, hey, they're Pot 1, but they could still be in the group of death. And so that's why this draw is going to be so fun to watch on Friday, because there's so many different possibilities, and I can't wait to see how it plays out. All right, well, thanks again for joining the show and listening to Here and Abroad this week. If you enjoyed the episode, please do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube, or that follow button if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or somewhere else. Thank you so much. I'm Frank Garza. You can follow me on X at FrankGarza007, and I'll be back next week with a new episode.